We Filipinos would not know this probably, but Saturday, a Nobel Peace Prize, Nobel Prize winner died. In our culture, we wouldn't know him, but he was an American because he migrated to the U.S., but he was born Hungarian, and he was a survivor of the Holocaust. So he was a Jew, but lived in one of those Eastern countries in Europe. And he was also a victim, survivor of the Holocaust. He was 15 when he was orphaned, and he was struggling to stay alive because he alone and his father remained alive when he was 15. But he was struggling to stay alive because he wanted to give encouragement to his father, because he knew that his father found out he was killed, it would not have any meaning to his father's life anymore. But anyway, this person was a survivor, and he saw the horrors of the Holocaust. He was brought to this. You probably would have heard the name Auschwitz, Poland, which was a concentration camp of the Nazis. He was a survivor there, and another place called Buchenwald. But he almost gave up on God and almost hated humanity. And I would like to quote him. This is what he said. He was an author, by the way, also. He said, "I belong to a generation that has often felt abandoned by God and betrayed by mankind. Yet I believe we must not give up on either. We must choose between the violence of adults and the smiles of children, between the ugliness of hate and the will to oppose it, between inflicting suffering and humiliation on our fellow man and offering him the solidarity and the hope that he deserves, or not. We can choose not to." And he continues to say, "I know, and I know from experience, that even in darkness, it is possible to create light and encourage compassion. I still believe in man in spite of man." See, we belong to a society and a culture, grew up in this, that easily gives up. I mean, the slightest little failure, the slightest little fault, the slightest little offense of somebody, we already give up on them. We don't forgive. We don't understand, even as Christians, even as the only Christian nation in Asia, we don't understand and we don't apply what Jesus said to forgive 70 times 7. I mean, we've seen this even in presidential terms. You know, the sins of the past, we don't forget. And we destroy whatever is identified with whoever we hate. But we give up on a lot less painful, a lot less uncomfortable situations than this guy has experienced, this Jew. We cry over, the littlest things. We complain about the slightest little discomfort, and we give up. We walk away. I'd like to also continue and quote this a novel that this person wrote. And he was giving an account of this very horrific scene. One day in the Nazi camp. He said, "One day as we returned from work, we saw 3 gallows. Big tip. 3 gallows erected at the plaza. And then there was a roll call. The officer surrounding us. Machine guns aimed at us. The usual drill. 3 prisoners were in chains. Among them, a little boy. A sad-eyed angel. The soldiers seemed more preoccupied, more worried than usual. To hang a child in front of thousands of onlookers was not a small matter. The head of the camp read the verdict. All eyes were on the child. He was pale, almost calm, but he was biting his lips as he stood in the shadow of the gallows. This time, the executioner refused to do his job. Probably, couldn't handle it. His conscience couldn't handle it. 3 other officers took his place. The 3 condemned prisoners together stepped onto the chairs, and the nooses were placed around their necks. The 2 adult men, 2 criminals to be executed, shouted, "Long live liberty!" But the boy was silent. Behind me, I heard somebody ask, "Where is God? Where is the merciful God? Where is He?" Then at the signal, the 3 chairs were tipped over. Total silence was in the camp. The horizon, the sun was setting. "Caps off!" screamed one officer. His voice quivered. For the rest of us, we were weeping. And then came the march past the victims, probably part of the ritual. The 2 men were no longer alive. Their tongues were hanging out, swollen and bluish. But the 3rd rope was still moving. The child, true life, was still breathing. And so he remained for more than half an hour, lingering between life and death, writhing before our eyes. And we were forced to look at him at close range. He was still alive when I passed him. His tongue was still red, his eyes not extinguished. Behind me, I heard the same voice asking, "For God's sake, where is God?" And then from within me, I heard a voice answer, "Where is He? This is where, hanging from this gallows, suffering with us. There is God in the horrific suffering of a child, not outside the suffering, but suffering with us." Imagine yourself experiencing something like that. I mean, we don't broadcast executions anymore, not like just during the Marcos time, right? But imagine yourself right there, witnessing live an execution such as that. See, if we do, we would probably endlessly hate the evil men who would do such an injustice, right? We would. This person lived through that and learned and understood how it is to still forgive, to not give up on man. Though he's tarnished, though he's fallen, God still works in him and does not give up on him. He also said, this guy said, the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is indifference. It's walking away from people who we judge as hopeless, as sinful and condemned to hell, even when they're still alive, even when God still does not give up hope on them. It's turning our back on the mess. It's choosing the convenience rather than the work. It's choosing to sit in a comfortable church rather than build your own and sweat it out. In the reading from Romans, St. Paul displayed his solidarity even with his persecutors, the Jewish people. And he would go to the extent of giving up and sacrificing his life for the sake of his very executioners and persecutors. Can you imagine that? In the gospel, it shows the heart of God. Jesus saying, how often I would like to gather you to me like a hen gathers her chicks under her wings. How often I would like to do that. How often this rebellious people for thousands of years and several generations who would rebel against God still would want to do that. Now remember Isaiah's prophecy. God saying, all day long I opened my arms to you, to a stubborn people, to a stiff-necked people. But this is God. That's why I chose the line earlier. The mercy of the Lord is everlasting. He does not give up on us. He doesn't see our weaknesses. He sees what's underneath that. So the weaknesses can be worked on with His help. But eventually Jesus did give His life for our sake, for the very sake of the people that killed Him. But He commanded us to also do the same, to love. This Sunday's gospel is about the Good Samaritan. And the Good Samaritan the parable was told to a person who asked, I'm to love my neighbor. Who is my neighbor? Who's my neighbor? Samaritan. He whom you deem as condemned. He who you consider as not your brother. Who you consider as outside the family of God, not the commonwealth of His household. Him. He is he whom you are to love. That is the challenge to us. But God will not ask us to do something He already has not done. He just sets an example for us, going through the same thing, going through the same experience, and encouraging us to also love like He does. Because that's the way it is in the kingdom of our God.